Hello, folks, and welcome to episode 1 of what is this? Season 5 of the DarkspiderCast. I legitimately sometimes wonder just how long I can really keep up with something like this, to be quite brutally honest. Like, when is eventually life just gonna come in and be like, you know what, that podcast thing, you don't really want to do that. You don't want to keep doing that, but I don't know. Most recently, I've been having a little bit of inspiration as far as keeping the podcast going, as far as just mellowing out and figuring out that, hey, you're gonna make this work. You can make stuff like this, and then the content creation for YouTube, and then maybe whatever kind of content creation you can do for a professional job or a job that pays the bills also on the side, which I guess is probably the only real thing or the only real subject that I can kind of utilize here in the intro to kind of catch you guys up on what's been going on since the season 4 finale, because there's an awful lot to talk about from the ending of season 4 a couple weeks back that relate to news involving movies, games, some biggie ones with when it comes to a particular movie that wow, I never seen something like this. And but it's funny because the action, what exactly happened is not so, it is surprising. Who it involves, what studio it involves, I'm kind of, and the subject at hand, I'm like, all right, now that makes it a little less surprising. The timing is what's most surprising, I would probably say. But if it was any other company, I would then be morbidly shocked. I said morbidly because of it's Morbin time, apparently. But yeah, so we have a lot of things to talk about in that realm as far as like movies, games, tech, things like that. But in terms of like my personal stuff, nothing really has developed anything that much different from before, except that I think now finally the lull of applications that I've been applying to and things are starting to kind of turn around where I'm getting kind of hit up a little bit in a way where I'm like, hey, you want to come in, or yeah, you want to talk, or hey, you want to have this interview. I in the past couple of weeks, I've already had about 3 or 4 interviews. Still on the pending side as far as what they're going to turn out, what exactly they're going to do, or what their actual response is going to be, but it's at least it's progress. It's something that's actually kind of turning around and coming forward. So at least there's that. There's actually one where I technically already did there's two. One, I did the interview, and I'm actually currently doing an assignment for them, a paid assignment, which I've already submitted. So now it's just a matter of waiting and seeing exactly what it is that they say as far as the quality of the assignment, whether or not it met the standards, and going forward from there. They did, I think, mention really quick in passing that the day after submission is actually when they were going to make their decision on that front. So should be a quick turnaround, and maybe I can keep you guys updated on next week's podcast. And then the other one said to come into the office on Friday from the time of this recording. So I'm like, all right, we'll see. No exact time and location was given, so I feel like, that information hopefully will be relayed pretty soon. So, a lot of things pending, but at least they're not looking pretty bad. And without going into too much detail as far as the specifics and like the exact the exact amount and all that good stuff, but let's just say I am getting a little bit of help from unemployment, so at least that's kind of keeping me afloat as far as like buying food, necessities, expenses, nothing crazy, but just like, in case I'm out of snacks, or in case I me and the girlfriend want to cook something or whatever and grab those kind of things, or if I want to make breakfast and I'm like out of a particular thing that I like, then now I can, possibly go out and get that. So, things on that front are relatively quiet, but they're not like crickets. You get what I'm saying? So everything's looking okay with that. So there's really not much that I can use in the way of a really good banger of an intro for season 5 from a personal level, except to just reiterate how thankful and appreciative I am that stuff is looking pretty good on the channel, on the specific main channel, Dark Spider David. Because right now, if you type in Dark Spider David, I went through the through the mechanics and necessities of how to make sure that when you type in Dark Spider David on YouTube, you get the main channel. You get the channel that I'm currently working on, the one that's currently monetized, and the one that's spearheading all of my content creation currently on YouTube that's specifically niched down to Batman and Spider-Man. And it's actually doing rather well. Um, the last, I want to say, like 2 or 3 videos are now in the thousands. I actually just posted a video that I thought was gonna do okay, but it's currently at like 3,000 views, and it's only been like a day or two since publishing. So, and of course, something that kind of helps out with that in relation to the algorithm is just also how well the Spider-Man Lotus video performed. I'm assuming that thanks to the algorithm, because of how well that Spider-Man Lotus video essay performed, it's pretty much taking that next essay or that next video and then flushing it to the people that like Spider-Man, that like Batman, and are hopefully showing up in their recommended feed and they're checking it out. Now, of course, the thing that kind of makes things a little nerve-wracking is if I post something that's, I don't want to say a complete 180 from the topic, because I always make it clear that I cover Spider-Man and Batman stuff. So my last, I posted the essay, and since the essay, there's only been one Batman related video, which was a McFarlane Toys review on the Dark Knight Returns figures that are not Batman, and then everything else has been Spider-Man related, and the Spider-Man stuff has been doing good. Even a follow-up, not really an essay, but a follow-up video of update kind of thing on what's been going on with the director, because he went ahead and deactivated his Twitter, so that kind of put a lot of things into question. I made a video on that, and that one took off. Then I recently did another essay type video on the Hasbro Marvel Legends No Way Home 3-pack and whether or not it's too expensive. And that's also doing pretty well, but the McFarlane stuff is not. So my next video is meant to be a McFarlane toy review, but it is for, in Plain Devil's Advocate, those Dark Knight Returns figures that I did a review recently on, they're kind of old. This next one is on a much more contemporary, modern figure. It's a figure that was on pre-order most recently, and it barely went into stock, and you can find it. Actually, that's the thing, I haven't even found it in retailers. Right now, you can definitely order it off of online retailers like Big Bad Toy Store and Amazon and such, and Entertainment Earth. So it's in stock to ship from there, but you can't. It's not at the level to be able to just walk into Target or Walmart and find it there. You get what I'm saying? So unless there's a specific area that broke that date and already has it up, I don't know. So hopefully we'll see how that performs. We'll also see how the thumbnail does, since I'm kind of revamping the McFarlane Toys, or pretty much all the action figure thumbnails from here on out, to be a little bit more straightforward, kind of mimicking all the other thumbnails that I've seen on YouTube thus far that cover these figures as well. So, that's pretty much everything that I've just been kind of maintaining, making sure that whatever success has come from the Lotus essay, the follow-up video, the Hasbro Marvel Legends, in that essay style kind of format with opening skits, experimentation and things like that. Can all that work in benefit to the channel of making people come into the video and be like, you know what, this guy's clever with the editing, clever with his opinions and such, let me hit subscribe. And it's doing a spectacular job at doing that. And there's no other, thing that's more indicative of that than to just have recently crossed the 3,000 subscriber threshold. I haven't posted at the time of me standing in front of this microphone, or sitting in front of this microphone and recording this. I have not made a public statement, a public posting. I'm probably going to do so right afterwards. But in podcast form, I want to absolutely make sure that you guys hear this, as far as the podcast services on Spotify, Google Podcasts, etc. And then, of course, when this eventually goes up on the YouTube channel, or the archive YouTube channel for the podcast specifically, thank you for helping that channel hit 3,000 subscribers. We're almost at the this is what's kind of nuts to me, is that this one is at 3,000 subscribers. It hasn't even been, we're almost on the cusp of a year since I've made this channel. I created this channel on September 9th. So we're about 11 months in, almost about 11 months in, and we're already at the halfway point of how many subscribers I've accrued on the channel prior to this one that has been around since 2009, which is the one that originally was called Dark Spider David, but now, since I've created a new channel and that one's more specific to Batman and Spider-Man, This other one, I figured, you know what? Let me just rebrand it to just my name, David Ortega. And that one has like 6.9 thousand subscribers. So this one's at 3,000. If we get to 3.5 ish or so in the next month or so, then in 1 year, I got half of the subscribers that I got in 12 on that prior one. And to me, that's an incredible accomplishment. So it only makes me wonder where could we possibly be in another year? And I'm not even thinking double. I'm thinking exponentially tripling or quadrupling, and hopefully going full time. But we'll see. All I can say right now, like I said, is thank you for hitting that threshold. As soon as I'm done recording, I'm gonna jump on my social media platforms and posting my thank yous and making sure that everybody knows how appreciative I am, because obviously this wouldn't happen without them. So far, that's probably the biggest update I can provide as far as what we kind of dealt with since the season 4 finale. So without further ado, let's get into the bulk of the news, because one little thing that did happen in between podcast seasons here that I did feel a little bad about not covering, but at the same time, there was nothing specifically Batman or Spider-Man related in a very niche kind of way, in a very focused kind of way, except for one thing. But I thought, I looked at everything across the board that was being talked about, and I thought to myself, you know what, we could save this for the Season 5 opener. And that's, of course, a little event called Comic-Con. But before we get into the Comic-Con goodness, whether it be for good or for bad, let's talk about what I've been playing. So remember how on the Season 4 finale I mentioned that I had played Sifu. I hadn't had a chance to beat it, but I was kind of giving off my first impressions, letting you guys know that segueing into my Game of the Year discussion during that episode, that Sifu could very well be into contention, but I definitely wanted to put some more time and then leave you guys with the cliffhanger as to whether or not I did in fact beat the game, or whether or not I did, and if I did, was it on the normal version, was it on the normal difficulty, or did I backtrack to student difficulty? Because for those of you who played this when it first came out, there was no difficulty option. That was actually something that was released in a patch a little while afterwards, like I want to say about a month and a half-ish later. And so here I am to kind of give you guys some resolution on that little cliffhanger. Did I beat Sifu? Yes and no. Officially, I did. So here's the thing, guys. And I did already post a thing on my Twitter. I would have posted on some Discord servers that I'm a part of, but unfortunately I'm no longer a part of those Discords because they're a little bit on the toxic kind of side of things. And I didn't really need that with my state of mind. But I did post a little blurb of this really quick on Twitter. Sifu is honestly now, after officially, not unofficially, but officially beating the final boss, I can honestly say, Sifu is my current Game of the Year. Guys, this is not even a thing that I have to like ponder or sit on or marinate. I marinated on it quite enough. Sifu's my current Game of the Year. No, I have still not played Elden Ring, even after a couple of weeks. This is probably going to be something that's just going to have to be later down the line, where there's more of a spell as far as a dry spell. Something, especially because of my finances taken into account, at least I know that I can kind of fall back on Elden Ring when the time comes. But as of right now, Sifu is my current Game of the Year, and here's why. All of the impressions that I said in that last episode, the finale of Season 4, still stay true. One thing that I don't know if I remember mentioning, and because of that, I'm going to go ahead and re-mention here. There are still some issues, as I mentioned in that finale. One thing that I did mention was that the game was a little bit light on the story, light on characterization, and that is still true even seeing the end credits. Nothing really gets explored. There's a twist at the end that I kind of saw coming. I'm like, that's not really surprising whatsoever. And so it still kind of feeds a little bit into that whole archetypal story of vengeance that you would expect from Chinese folklore, even any kind of Polyasian kind of mythology, or anything that has to do with martial arts, whether it be Chinese, Japanese, Korean, etc., you name it. it's still there. It's not exactly the game's strong point, and a lot of other people have criticized the game for that. Like, it's not just me saying that; it's a widespread consensus that the story in Sifu is not exactly gripping, with that twist even still being thrown in there at the very end. With that said, one thing that I did not mention in my caveats, my cons for the game, that is still here after beating the game, popping the disc out, and finally being done with it, the camera is not exactly the best. Sometimes the camera is probably one of the greatest hindrances of the game outside of the story. I understand that the game's focus is not the story, but when the game's focus is in fact the gameplay and the combat, the camera needs to be intuitive. The camera needs to benefit the player and work in complete synchronicity with the gameplay. And it's not always doing that. There's times where the camera is, in fact, incredibly problematic. And thankfully, it's a very free-flowing camera. It's not fixed. It's not like you can't do anything about it. You can use the right stick to move it about. But there's times where that's just not good enough because of just how quick and neck-breaking the speed of the combat is. There's actually sometimes not enough time for your right thumb to get to the stick because your brain and your fingers are just so affixed to guarding and to making sure that you're covering all the angles surrounding your character. And because of that, it just sometimes doesn't feel like you have enough time to respond to move the camera around, and ultimately it leads to, unfortunately, one of your deaths. So I wanted to make sure to get that out of the way before we move on to why this game is my game of the year, despite, like I said, the discrepancies with the camera and a little bit of how the story comes up a little bit short. Because the greatest strengths of what I mentioned in that last episode, and I don't want to repeat myself a little too much, but just to reiterate really briefly and recap how they mapped the way of kung fu. And I know it sounds a little ridiculous, but just the way that they were able to map those mechanics to the controller in a way where it just never once feels like it comes across as button mashy. It feels fluid. You feel the punches land. You feel the really satisfying serotonin boost whenever you parry at the right time. You are able to deflect moves in a way that feels organic to how kung fu would feel like in real life, only just in a video game sense of speaking. It still carries on through from beginning to end. And so for a while, what I was mentioning in that last episode, is that after a little while of like unlocking all the upgrades, running through the club multiple times, hearing the same music, seeing the same boss fights, and doing like that, especially when leading up to the third boss fight that I was having an awful lot of a hard time with, I was kind of hinting, should I drop the difficulty just so I can see this thing to the end, or what should I do? I don't know what it was. It's very difficult to quantify, but it was either that night or later or the next night when I recorded that episode and mentioned that actual anecdote in that recording, in that podcast episode, where I played and something finally clicked in how I adapted to that boss fight in a way where I'm like, I cannot fight this girl the way that I fought the dude before with the stick that was being very Shao Kahn-y in the way that he was spamming. She wasn't spamming. She was actually, well, I mean, minus a couple of moves here with her here and there with her nunchucks in her first phase, without going into too many spoilery territory, because I feel like the greatest spoilers with a game like Sifu is not so much from the story. Like I said, the story is kind of meh, but it's more so in just what's waiting for you at the other end of that fight. Whether it be with some of the boss fights or some of the environments where you don't expect a certain wave of enemies to kind of come around the corner. But without ruining it, there was just a moment in the first phase that something clicked with me that made me go, okay, this is about to be potentially tedious and time consuming, but I think I nailed a way to get to her second phase in a way that's different from the way I've tackled the previous bosses. And when that finally clicked, sure enough, I got to the second fight. The second fight then had its own pattern that I was able to kind of piece together. And I don't know, I just had that moment where even though I died, I was happy. I put the controller down and I'm like, I got her. I got her on the next one. And sure enough, on the next one, I defeated her. I defeated her. I unlocked the fourth level, and I'm like, if that could be done, I can do this without lowering the difficulty. And that was the hook of the game. That's what made the game just so addictive, is that right when I'm on the precipice of debating with myself, should I lower the difficulty, whatever, the game would just inch me over, because I would just subconsciously learn what a character would do, what a boss fight would do, where in the environment were certain enemies, or better yet, were certain items in the environment I could use to my advantage, where there were some jade statues where I can allocate my XP, or if I was at a younger age, I can then take advantage of another a boon or upgrade or something that I can apply to the character. And before I knew it, I was not even progressing necessarily, even though I had the option. Like, I can't remember who. I think it was the fourth boss fight that I defeated, and I was able to go to the fifth and last level, but I voluntarily decided to backtrack and go back to the fourth fight, especially after unlocking certain things that make things go a little are able to expedite the process in terms of going across levels and getting to the final boss a little of that level a little quicker. I was like, you know what? Let me take advantage of this and see if I can not only beat this level with a younger age, that way I can go into the next level at a younger age and take advantage of that, but also figure out if there was a quicker strategy, like a quicker fork in the road that was able to just be better. Like, why not try to be better? Why settle for less? Why settle for the bare bones? And that's one of the messages that was able to hit me, rather deep with this game, especially where I'm at in life. As I've mentioned in episodes prior, where I wasn't really doing very well mentally, financially, with my current job status or lack thereof, and how things have been kind of down as far as, like I said, my mental state and things happening, opportunities kind of outside of my grasp. And Sifu has frankly been a great game that I've come across in the time of my life, where I was like, he's kind of, the character I'm playing, or her, if you choose to play as a girl, kind of, doing the physical interpretation of what I'm trying to go for, where failure is part of the process. And I know that that's kind of cliche. I've had other people in my life tell me the same thing. But what I was able to latch onto, and again, it still feels a little difficult to explain. It's just something that you just kind of have to experience, especially if you were to play with this game, should you have a PS4 or a PS5. But it was upon the defeat of some of those bosses where it's not so much the satisfaction of beating the boss but just the wonder, the curiosity that makes me go, if I was able to do that, who is to say that I can't either beat the next boss at a younger age or beat that last boss and try again, only this time with a different strategy, with a different set of moves, with a different upgrade that I can reallocate. And that's ultimately what Sifu was able to draw me in, with that addictive nature. And I'm really just rambling on at this point. But like I said, the way it was able to thematically tie in with what was going on in my life, it's just a perfect game that I really needed right now. That by the end, like I said, I was just trying to lessen my age so that I can also go into the final boss with a strategic advantage, where I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm going to die repeatedly. It's going to be a challenge, and he could come off as spammy, and trust me, there were moments where I'm like, don't spike the controller, David. Don't do it. Don't give in to temptation, and just tackle at it from a patient standpoint. And that's where the thing about the game is learning. When to be the teacher, when to be the student, when to attack, when to defend. Like I said, I don't want to divulge too much in the event that whoever's listening to this had their eye on Sifu and were planning on playing it, should they get a PS5, or even prior to getting a PS5, this is also still available for PlayStation 4, and get it that way. Let's just say that some of the things that unfold here towards the end with the final fight or the final level then teaches you to take everything that you've been learning and kind of, I don't want to say invert it, but just think of it from a different perspective. You've been attacking this whole time. Maybe it's time to not attack. And that's, things like that just clicked for me towards the end, where I'm like, oh, it's this mental explosion. And there I was, beating the final boss without having lowered the difficulty. I stayed on Disciple, and like I said, I just felt so euphoric about it. Now, again, keeping things vague, no spoilers. The game then does. That's where I have to specifically and officially and say officially and technically, I beat the final boss on that default difficulty. Unofficially, the game then does something. Again, keeping things vague, where that reminded me an awful lot of Mario games, where they say, "Oh yeah, technically, officially, you beat the game, you beat that final boss. Unofficially, we're not gonna give you the satisfaction of watching those credits roll unless you do this other thing." And so this is where it could get a little subjective, a little bit in the gray area, from your guys' perspective who have played and probably beaten the game, and can look at me in that manner and be like, unofficially, you didn't beat the game in that difficulty. Because when I beat the final boss, and the game then told me that there's a B-side to this entire endeavor, that then made me go, you know what? I got to the final boss and I defeated the final boss on that standard difficulty. Let me reward myself with the way I was patient, the way I persevered, the way I learned, the way I trained as a genuine Sifu. Let me reward myself by lowering the difficulty to then see what the B-side of this whole trek, this whole journey of becoming being the student and then transforming into the master, really, has to say for me. And I'm kind of glad that I did, because once again, still speaking to the strengths of this game of teaching you patience and teaching you how to take everything that you've been learning and kind of flip it on its head. That's pretty much what this B-side kind of does. It's like, okay, once again, you've been a little bit more on the attack. How about you try to be a little bit more on the defense and learn how to, not look at things as clear cut as like, oh, defeat this enemy. No, there's sometimes more to that. And because of that, I thought about it and I'm like, yeah, there was no way I was going to be able to get to the end of this true ending if I hadn't lowered the difficulty. Even lowering the difficulty, there were still some struggles towards the end of trying to master what the game was trying to evoke to me. And so I was kind of glad. I didn't really feel anything as far as like regret or um, or anything that made me think, oh, I should probably have left it for the satisfaction, for the bragging rights of. No, I was like, you know what, I'm glad that B-side I rewarded myself with a lower difficulty, so because it just felt like a true balance to myself, the way that I wanted to play. And then that's finally when the credits rolled. So officially, I beat that final boss on the standard difficulty. Unofficially, I did lower it to the easier difficulty to see that extra ending, that extra B-side to the overall campaign. But I still thought that it was well worth it. And I still walked away from the game with those credits rolling, thinking to myself, that was one of the more transformative experiences that I've had playing a game in some time. Not ever necessarily, but in a year where I was, beating games and thinking to myself, okay, that was cool or that was fun, but I never really walked away thinking, man, what an experience. This was finally the first one that made me go, if I can go that distance with something like Sifu, then, Elden Ring, I might be going. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that if I was going into Elden Ring without having played Sifu, we would be. I would probably be speaking about it or thinking about it in a completely different mind state, and that's just how transformative and introspective my experience with Sifu really is, and it's an experience worth kind of renown of not only being in the Game of the Year discussion, but possibly taking the slot of my current Game of the Year. And that's exactly where Sifu stands. And while we're on the subject of culturally driven games such as Sifu, I also managed to play an indie game called Raji, an Ancient Epic. Or Ancient Epic, I think that's what it was called. But basically, it's a game rooted in Indian culture and Indian legend, made by Indian developers. So that was pretty cool. And it is an indie game. Indian game. I'm sorry, I couldn't pass up the opportunity. But one of the reasons why is because it was on my Game Pass backlog for the longest time. But sadly, not too long ago, they did announce that it was going to be removed from the service on July 31st. So probably by the time you guys are listening to this, it's been long gone. So very difficult to recommend unless you managed to find that at a sale through Game Pass, or if it's on the eShop, which I do believe that it is on Nintendo Switch. And the reason why I say if you could find it on a sale, which is practically how I'm kind of spoiling um, my outlook on the game, is that it's a short experience. It's only meant to be about 4 to 5 hours long, so I was able to beat it across 2 days. The only reason why 2 days is because I didn't really play that much each day due to me having to work on videos and hanging out with the girlfriend and things like that. But during the 2 days that I played, I logged in about an hour, hour and a half each time because I wanted to take my time with it. I wanted to get a sense of how they made it clear that this is a very Indian driven game as far as the culture, as far as the legend, the way everything just kind of seeps out of this game in a way that genuinely looks beautiful. Like, this is actually one of the finer looking indie games I've played in a while as far as art direction, how they're able to take so many things that have that Indian infused design as far as like temples and environments and vistas and things like that, especially when the view of the game is from kind of like a top down isometric, and because of that it favors the game. This is actually one of the few indie games where I'm glad that it's top down and your character's like super tiny, because the environments are just so gargantuan, but in a very positive way, in a way where everything just feels very colorful. Even the areas where the game says, "Oh, this land has been overtaken by corruption," and I'm like, "You sure?" Because it looks rather nice. You got waterfalls and all these glistening vistas and environments, and it just pops. And so it's one of the prettier indie games. And it tells the story of this character named Raji who's trying to find her brother amidst this chaos that's happening within the land. And as you kind of navigate the campaign, and she's trying to look for her brother, the certain Indian gods are kind of overlooking her, guiding her, while at the same time also giving her the tools that not only will she utilize to vanquish evil, but also find her brother. And this is ultimately where the gameplay kind of comes into the forefront of the game, that then made me realize, oh my god, I can't believe this. I'm playing what is essentially an Indian God of War in terms of the combat and in terms of the mechanics layered to the controller. That pretty much that's how it plays out. And ultimately, I ended up having a good amount of fun with the game as Raji kind of learns how to utilize certain weapons that are bestowed upon her by the gods, and she's able to alternate between the different moves and being able to equip power ups, and the way she's able to pull off some of these maneuvers and these mechanics. It's actually really, really fun, especially with some of these enemies that have awesome, really fucking awesome designs as far as how they're, like I said, taken from Indian literature and Indian culture. They just look also downright menacing. There's some of them where I'm like, no, I don't want to fuck with that thing. But it plays to the game's strengths, especially when Raji starts to learn how to combat these enemies. With that said, that then leads to what ultimately becomes a crux of the game, is that after a little while, it's funny how this kind of happens sometimes. The game is only 5 hours. And because the game is only 5 hours, after a little while, there's an upgrade system that involves these orbs that you're able to allocate to certain moves and certain characteristics. Like sometimes your weapon is able to dispel lightning damage and things like that. But after a while, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's because of the shortness of the game, but I just found the upgrade system to not really matter all that much. Like after a while, I don't know what it is, but I just walked away from the game going, I didn't really need an upgrade system. It was more about learning the pattern of some of these enemies, whether it be the standard enemies that come to you in waves, or if it has to do with some of the boss fights that generally have a sense of scale and spectacle to them. But after a while, you kind of are, I'm not going to say the game is easy, but once you iron down some of the patterns, it's like, well, the upgrade system, not 100% necessary. They could have done without that. And also, after a little while, the pacing starts to slow down, that after a while, especially during the last 2 or 3 levels, I can kind of jump into a level and go, okay, well, this is the area where the game's gonna lock me down and be like, well, you can't leave until you beat these wave of enemies. Move on and rinse and repeat, and it gets a little rinse and repeaty towards the end, even as they try to change things up via a stealth mission that went on for a little too long, or I don't know, just other little areas. Granted, some of the boss fights are pretty cool. There was one in particular that, like I said, it's just a matter of nailing down the pattern. But the final boss fight, whew, that was actually really well designed. It just led to a very anticlimactic cinematic ending, and that also kind of goes back to the cinematics that, it starts to show its budget. The scale, you can definitely see it coming out of the gameplay, and that's cool in the environments. But once it comes to the storytelling nature, it fades to black, and then we get these like animatics kind of looking kind of cutscenes that I was like, oh well. I guess the compromise in the budget had to come from somewhere, and that's pretty much where it shows off. So, if anything, because of how awesome the visuals that are taken from Indian culture are kind of seeping out of the environment are just so cool, it made me wish that they would have gotten a bigger budget so that then the cutscenes will then be fully realized with full on 3D animations with these environments. And it makes me feel like we were kind of on the precipice of a missed opportunity because of the fact of how everything looked good in game. That when it cuts to these cutscenes that are just using like these shadow puppets and things like that, I'm like, I really wish that we could have taken advantage of those environments, but it is what it is. That's where the budget laid out, and that's why it's an indie game. Once I rolled credits on it, I thought to myself, yeah, that was a really decent experience. It had its caveats, but overall, a worthwhile experience that, if it was still up on Game Pass, I definitely would have said, check it out. Now that it's gone, I would say, I don't know what the MSRP is on it. I think it's like $20. 20 might be just a tad steep. If it goes down to like 15 or 10, that would be perfect, and I recommend that at that level. And then there's the third and final game that I do want to talk about, but only briefly because I'm still technically about halfway through, and it's for one of my Game Pass games, a game that was part of the Game Pass backlog, but also the Game Pass 2022 backlog, so it was set to be released this year. I saw it as a 2022 release, and I was like, all right, let's add this to the list. And I was going back and forth as far as scheduling, as far as what's ahead of me, time-wise, life-wise, and I'm like, you know what, let me play this next. I just got done with Sifu. I just got done with one other Game Pass game that I need. Oh, Raji, as I mentioned, and because of the time, and I thought, you know what, I'm on Xbox. How about we stick with Xbox? But I'm just not ready. I am still not ready to jump on that Elden Ring. I'm sorry, but I am not. So what can I do? Let's try to whittle down the Game Pass backlog, especially if it pertains to 2022. And it was either between this particular game and the other one, which is Infernax, and because they're both from 2022 releases. And I saw Infernax. I saw that it's a challenging, kind of 2D platform a la Castlevania. Just got done with something very challenging like Sifu. So I was like, let me try this other game. And it's called Nobody Saves the World. That's the title of the game, Nobody Saves the World. And I saw the art style, and I thought that it looked quirky and neat, but I wasn't really... I went into the game rather fresh. Like, I barely knew anything about the game. Like, I don't know. I didn't know who made it. I don't know what genre it was. I just saw the cover, the cartoony nature of that cover, and I was like, all right, this could be an easy, maybe like a walking sim or a point-and-click adventure or whimsical adventure. I don't know. Loaded it up insecurely and almost rather reluctantly because I was thinking to myself, like, if I start this up and don't like it, the only thing that's going to cross my mind is like, oh, I could have started Elden Ring or I could have started some other game. Pokemon Legends Arceus. I've been meaning to get through that and this and that. And then the first thing I see is a logo pop up. And that logo is for a company, for the developer, called Drinkbox Studios. And as soon as I saw this logo and read the title of the logo of this developer, I was like, why does this sound incredibly familiar? And immediately, like without a second thought, looked it up, and that's where it hit me. These are the people that made Guacamelee, Guacamelee 2, and Severed, and a couple of other games, but most notably Guacamelee. And that's where I was like, yeah, I love that game. I really, really do. A lot of people do. It's a really well-made game. And so there's quality there, and I'm like, oh shit, how did I not know that they made this? Like, I feel like it would have reached me at some point that they have made this game, considering the people behind it. And so I started loading it up, and yeah, the art style kind of teeters on being kind of flash animation like, similar to Guacamole, except it doesn't have as much inspiration, because obviously Guacamole rooted in Mexican luchador culture. You have an awful lot of design palettes and colorful, things that have to do with Mexican culture, and you can kind of see it seep through. Even a game like Severed felt a little bit inspired. uh, I will admit that Nobody Saves the World has this kind of very loose design style to the art, where characters just look like they were just stenciled out, and they look very crude and not necessarily the best, but you can also argue that that's kind of the point. And animation wise, there's just, a couple of frames, a couple of actions here and there. So I'll probably say the main weak point about the game thus far is the animation, where it's colorful. You have a lot of like shades and things filled in within the world, but it's also very 2D and very flat, as far as nothing that is anything to write home about. But within just a matter of 2 or so-ish hours, I was hooked. I was like, yeah, they've done it. Drinkbox Studios done it again, where they made something that's very intuitive and very easy to play, but also difficult to master. The reason why is because you play as this character that is, I don't know if this is exactly their name, but they're a nobody. Some characters will even make self-referential remarks about you, about the fact that you look like a soulless baby tiny human thing without any eyes. But the concept is that this nobody, this plain basic nobody thing, creature, man, person thing, is bestowed the powers to be able to transform into different forms that can do different things, whether it be a knight that's able to wield a sword, or a ranger that's able to shoot bows and arrows, a horse that's able to gallop and trot across enemies, an egg that's literally able to just be an egg. It gets quirky and weird, but in a very charming sort of way. And the humor also kind of replicates that. It's not as amusing as Guacamole. There's a couple of jokes here and there that fall a little flat, but overall, it still has a humoristic, tongue-in-cheek kind of approach to its nature. And above that is also the quest design, because that's ultimately what hooked me, is that it gives you quests upon quests, but a quest, and sometimes it becomes a little self-referential about how many quests it's really giving you, that it parodies itself. But the way it's able to tie and design those quests to each of the forms that you're able to transform into, and make those abilities not only intuitive to switch through and play through, and also just really fun, is really the draw. And so traversal is really nice, like a top-down kind of Zelda sort of way, from the old school traditional Zelda from like the original 85 version. While at the same time retaining that 2D art style. But as you kind of move around, you unlock more of the map, and you go to these different dungeons, you gain treasures and equipment, and of course you level up with XP. But the XP, like I said, just reaches parody amounts, to where it's like you gain XP for doing just the simplest mundane things, but the game is just the game's focus is to just make you have fun with these different forms, and in that fun is unlocking different abilities and attributes about those forms. And just overall, tailoring all these mechanics together was just done really fun. It may not be the most clever or original thing, as far as gaming is concerned. Like, I would not blame anybody who loads this up and says, "Oh, it's just like Zelda," or "it does these things," or it feels a bit fetch questy," because at times it can kind of do that. But like I said, the way that it's able to just give you agency over, like, hey, if you want to do that quest, fine. It's almost like every quest is a side quest, but except for a couple of that need to progress the story. But the freedom and the pace that you're able to tackle it on is ultimately led up to you in a, like I said, a very intuitive and lax way. There's times where I've played this game in a very serious way, where I have the headphones hooked up, I'm listening to the soundtrack, I am hearing these characters mumble to each other. They have a couple of like little grunts and like, huh, yeah, kind of thing. So you don't actually have any voice acting, you just have the dialogue pop up on the screen. And because of that, that's what I was going to get into, is that I pretty much developed two playstyles of tackling this game. One where I'm focused, I have the headphones hooked up, I'm listening to the soundtrack, I'm lasered in, especially when I'm dealing with story involved quests that actually progress the story. And then there's others where it's literally just like, the moments where I do have to, like I said, admit to someone blaming this game of being a little side questy, where it is a matter of like, oh, go get me these things or go do that, and I look at the quest as simply just an ends to a way to make meets end as far as XP, as far as getting attribute points, as far as getting currency, gold, so I can buy shit and make my characters better. And whenever that happens, I have been able to play the game in a way where I'm able to play some other RPGs, like just detaching myself from the game as far as the headphones, plugging them into my computer or to my phone, and listening to a video or to a podcast while I just casually play on the side. And I like having that creative control. Plus, with my OCD, not only as a person, but also as a gamer, being able to just check out, it gets satisfying. It gets satisfying. There's been so many moments where I get like 3 or 4 quests done in one round. I look at a dungeon and go, yo, within this dungeon, I could probably get 3 of these objectives completed, and you get rewarded for virtually all of them. And it's satisfying. Until we get to this halfway point. We got to the halfway point, and to make it clear that you're pretty much halfway through the game because of the way that the pacing at which you're unlocking the map, because eventually, I was thinking to myself, oh, let me unlock the map as much as possible, and you do have fast travel points to make traversal a little bit easier. But eventually the game does stop you and handicap you a little bit in as far as unlocking the map, where you're not going to be able to get past any kind of locked gate unless you've progressed more in the story. So eventually I had to do that, and I did get through that, but it's at this turning point where shit has gotten just a little frustrating in a way where now the game is kind of forcing you to grind and forcing you to do some fetch questy stuff, because I've been doing that for so many hours now that I finally told myself, okay, now let's beeline the story for a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Like, I want to have sessions where I do nothing but story. And unfortunately, the past couple of sessions that I've tried doing that, and mind you, I am now, I want to say, around the cusp of about 15 hours in, maybe 12, somewhere between 12 and 15 hours. There's been times where I legit can't progress and I'm stuck because these enemies are chewing up my ass, and the game's pretty much indirectly telling me, it's time to grind it out. What you've been doing for pleasure, now you kind of have to do it for business. And that is where I'm getting a little concerned, where out of nowhere the difficulty has spiked up in either the amount of enemies the game's throwing at me or the type of enemies that I've never seen before, and now I'm looking at it and going, okay, how the fuck do I beat this guy? And so it's cool to see that the game at least kind of favors a little bit of experimentation, because eventually you do get to a point where certain attributes of some of the forms you unlock can actually be used with other forms. I don't want to spoil too much, but let's just say that things get a little creative in a way that I really would have wanted to, both as a developer and as a gamer, and I'm glad to see that the game took those steps. It's just becoming a concern of how grindy is the game really gonna get before eventually I look at it and go, okay, enough is enough. I really do want to just finish the game now. But instead, the game is quite both metaphorically and literally gonna gatekeep me. I'll keep you guys updated on next week's episode should I beat this game, but that's my goal, is to beat it by next week's podcast so that then I can start up something new and keep you guys updated. But for now, Nobody Saves the World is definitely an underrated gem of 2022, just with a couple of caveats to keep in mind. So I'm obviously not gonna want to cover every single little thing that was announced and showcased at Comic-Con. We're gonna focus on the main juggernauts here, right? It's funny because part of me wants to say, we're not going to cover everything. And at the same time, I feel like we can kind of envelope a certain particular genre, and that's the medieval fantasy sword and shield kind of subgenre, all under one blanketed roof here at the beginning, with new looks, including brand new trailers and extensive looks and things like that. That was either behind closed doors or stuff that was later published online in full HD for Dungeons and Dragons, the new movie with Chris Pine and Michelle Rodriguez. And new trailers for the Lord of the Rings show on Amazon Prime, and then a new trailer for what else was it? There was something else that was very medievalish and things like that. But there was Lord of the Rings. Game of Thrones. There you go. That's what it was. It wasn't Game of Thrones, but it was House of the Dragon coming to HBO Max. Honestly, after a little while, they all started to look the same. I know they're not the same. But there was just something about their presentation that I'm like, is it just me, or they're all just kind of blending each other? And ironically, and I'm not saying this just to troll, the one that looked to stand out the most was actually the Dungeons and Dragons one, and that was only because they used the Led Zeppelin song. So you can kind of get the gist that they're going for a different tone than the other two properties. But overall, they all just looked kind of meh. I was just like, all right, moving on. I'll see what the word of mouth is really when we finally cross that bridge. And like I said, going beyond that, we just had like little introspective looks. It looks like there was a very brief trailer. It wasn't even a trailer. It was more like a logo reveal or whatever for the new National Treasure show that's going to be on Disney Plus. That's not going to have Nick Cage, but it's probably going to have Nick Cage. And like the last episode is a cameo. They already confirmed that Justin Bartha's Riley is going to be showing up in like a mentor role. So I'm like, okay, so it takes place in the universe. I don't see Nick Cage saying no, because it's very difficult for him to say no to movies and projects. So I'm like, yeah, it's probably gonna happen at some point. I mean, it's got to, right? So we get all that good stuff, confirmation of little information. It was actually at Comic-Con where we got a new trailer for the Batgirl gameplay. Speaking of Batgirl, Batgirl's the talk of the town right now. And we do have a story to cover. It was kind of forementioned a little bit, or at least referenced in the intro, so we'll get to that eventually. But we did get Batgirl gameplay for Gotham Knights, which is set to come out on October 25th. And I don't want to talk about it too much here on the podcast because I already did a trailer reaction and breakdown on the Niche channel. Frankly, I'm still a little perplexed as to why I still do those, because unfortunately they're the lowest performing videos that I do on the channel, but I feel like it's kind of my, I don't want to say obligation, because there's technically no obligation, but because there's an ethical duty that I have covering that stuff, because I am a dedicated Spider-Man and Batman channel, and since Gotham Knights is Batman related, I feel like it needs to be done. So I did do a video on that. If you guys want full details, you guys can check out the link in the description. But just kind of an abridged version of how I felt about that trailer. Frankly, Batgirl might just be my main in Gotham Knights, provided there are missions where you get to choose your hero and who you go into the battlefield with. Because if it's all specifically like, oh, you have to play this level as Batgirl, you have to play this level as Red Hood, that's going to be a bit of a bummer, because I can't shake the feeling that Batgirl might be my favorite amongst the four. And yes, there's a bit of a bias there. That bias being that her arsenal and her gameplay and her style is probably going to be the closest one to Batman than the others. And she's also going to have a much more, I don't want to say cathartic, but just something more empathetic about her character that's going to make me resonate with her a little bit better, because she's not just mourning Batman as well, because literally the rest of the three guys, the rest of the Bat family is mourning Batman. She kind of is, but she's mainly mourning her father, Jim Gordon. So there's a separation there that feels unique, and she's mourning someone who was more of an average Joe than Batman. A lot of people say, oh, Batman's human, but he was a billionaire. He was born into it. He was inherited all that money. Yeah, whereas Jim Gordon is not. Jim Gordon is much more of a regular human being than Batman arguably is, because he's not rich. He is a dude. He doesn't have the fancy suit or the gadgets. He's literally just a cop, or becoming eventually a lieutenant, who's trying to be just the bright light in Gotham. So there's something more. There's something more there to attach, and because of that, I feel like Batgirl might just stand out a little bit more than the other guys. But we'll see come October 25th, because a lot can happen in the time since then. A lot could be revealed as far as the microtransactions or the things that could be going on behind the curtains with that game, and might be a turd fire. I don't know. Or it might be one of my favorite games of the year. We shall see. But they were able to showcase a little bit on that. They also confirmed that the Joker won't be in Gotham Knights, etc., etc. Some Star Trek stuff, He-Man stuff. I was about to say Wheel of Fortune. Wheel of Time from Amazon got renewed for a third season. A lot of other different things for animation. Yada yada yada. Yeah, I gotta be honest. Like I said, a lot of things that just don't really grab my attention all that much. So we really need to go to the juggernauts here. DC, that was nothing. Not really. Oh man, I almost want to save DC for a little bit later in the show because it's tied to Warner Brothers, and then Warner Brothers and DC and Tangent are tied to another big story later in the. You know what? I am gonna do that. I'm not gonna tackle about the stuff that was shown at DC's showcase during Comic-Con, only because there's a very perfect segue there, a perfect connection to an even grander story that I'm going to talk about later on in the show. So we're going to go ahead and just skip over DC and talk about the other major juggernaut, Marvel. Now, but it's funny because Marvel was like, we're going to talk about some things, show some things, but our bigger announcements are going to be for D23. After this Comic-Con, I'm thinking to myself, shit, if that was, what you were going to where you're gonna show for Comic-Con, and that was barely the gist of it, and you got even bigger and more bountiful stuff saved up for D23. Oh man, we're in trouble. And here I was thinking to myself, oh, we're starting to feel the fatigue. One of my last episodes in season 4 was about how the Marvel fatigue is starting to set in with how meh both Thor: Love and Thunder and Miss Marvel felt. But after these announcements, I'm not gonna full on be like, shit, we're back, boys. We're back in the grind. We're back on the saddle or whatever. I'm not gonna full on say that, but there is room for very fueled and introspective theorization. You know what I'm saying? Discussion to have in a way that feels pretty cool to have. If that makes any sense. I don't want to use the word hype. I really don't want to go there just yet, but there's something that could, we can all kind of pick apart as far as what was shown here from Marvel. Now, there were plenty of announcements, but I want to tackle the two main trailers that were showcased during Comic-Con. One of them was for Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, and I did what. It's funny because all these trailers I actually did watch them as soon as they broke, only because I was already online. I wasn't really playing. I was editing, but I saw them break, and I thought to myself, let's watch them. That way, I don't get things easily spoiled for me. So I watched the Wakanda Forever trailer, and so far, this is my favorite trailer from Marvel in a while in terms of technical execution, the way it was edited, the way it was paced, and the perfect style of song and the momentum. It's a very rewatchable trailer as far as hitting the feels, hitting everything. It's shaping up to be a very pretty looking movie. Like, there's so many shots, especially early on in the trailer, where there's an awful lot of the somber moments that that it was alluring to. That's obviously going to be the elephant in the room tackling this movie with the unfortunate passing of Chadwick Boseman and whatnot. So it was able to tackle that with grace. And the trailer is giving me the feeling that the movie's going to be able to embrace that with, like I said, grace and prosperity, and be able to move on while at the same time tackling the subject matter in a mature and poignant way. With that said, of course, this is me we're talking about, and I am generally the skeptic amongst my group of peers, whether it be with friends, family, anybody that I'm with. As far as content creators, I'm always going to be the one to have the but ellipses. And going back to what I mentioned about this looking to be a very pretty film as far as like cinematography, some gorgeous shots like that were mostly shown in the first half of the trailer, where you had the underwater birth scene of who we're all pretty certain is Namor. As well as some scenes of T'Challa's family kind of looking off into the distance, probably after his recent passing. What we're assuming is the funeral scene of all of them dressed in white and dancing, and the slow-mo and how it's filmed. It looks great. However, someone on Twitter Obviously I can't, it's very difficult to showcase it here in podcast form, but someone on Twitter did it did post out a set of screenshots, a set of shots that were pretty much comparison shots from one of the trailers for the first Black Panther, and then the same shot that was actually from the movie. And unfortunately, it was a similar case where we had some really good looking shots that were unfortunately kind of manipulated using CG, where I don't know if they like had to do some reshoots, and in the process they had to move characters around via CG, and because of that they had to like relight some of the characters. Like one of the shots is the shot of I don't know if this is a spoiler for the first Black Panther, but basically after T'Challa is presumed dead after being thrown over the waterfall, but then he comes back and he's looking up at Killmonger. He's like, "Hey, I'm not dead," and he has his arms open. It showed the shot from the trailer, and the shot from the trailer looked pretty well lit, and cinematography looked good, and he looked good in the costume. But then this Twitter user showed that shot from the trailer that looked good, and then a shot from the movie, and the background's different, and because the background's different, you can tell that they took him and rotoscoped him into a different scene, into a different setting. And in doing so, they also had to change the lighting on him, so he had some weird lighting and shades and highlights around his face, and it just looked off. And they added like the purple gleaming glow going throughout his costume, and yeah, seeing that tweet, I was like, oof. And the tweet even had the caption, "This is why I'm holding reservation after that Wakanda trailer," and I'm like, ugh, that's a fair point. That is a very, very, very fair point. So I'm hoping that the finished result we get in the when the movie comes out is exactly how it looked like in the trailer, because that would be very unfortunate to have another situation like this. And on a much more slightly delicate note that could land me in trouble, but honestly, I'm gonna say it, but I'm gonna say it in a constructive way and in a delicate way, in a way that sounds reasonable. And it's purely speculation. I'm not saying that this is gonna happen with the movie. I'm not, but I'm hoping that the movie doesn't just, because I'm seeing a lot of these comments that were in the trailer, on YouTube, and then of course trailer reactions. Oh my god, the trailer fucking reactions. Because just out of curiosity, I type in Wakanda trailer, Wakanda Forever trailer reaction, and literally every fucking thumbnail is the person crying like that, like, oh, with the Kleenex, and they have their hands. I'm gestating right now behind the mic, with their hands up against their face, covering their eyes, and they got like the crying face and all this stuff because, of course, like I said, the subject at hand, Chadwick Boseman's passing. But after like the 15th thumbnail, I'm not exaggerating, I'm not kidding around, 15th thumbnail, that's when I finally thought to myself, I really hope this movie doesn't just get by on feeding on the emotional weight of the unfortunate, like I said, the unfortunate passing um of Chadwick Boseman, and not deliver a much more nuanced story than the first one had. I don't want it. I don't want it to fall into the general trappings that Marvel has been laying on, and I wanted to explore, because what I'm seeing about Namor's involvement, the cinematography and the setting of Atlantis and how it's involved, I even love the cultural change of him, making him more Aztec driven. I love that, and he looks awesome underwater. And the actor that they got him to play, he looks dope. Um, I just don't want the movie to skirt on emotional weight just because of his passing. And I'm not saying they're gonna go to this ridiculous mile. I know that. I know they're not gonna do this. I know it. Some may hear this comparison and go, "They're not the same thing." How can it? No, I'm not saying that. But you know what situation this is reminding me of? Furious 7, Fast and Furious 7, which was the last movie with Paul Walker that had that emotional ending, that had needed the brothers to be called in so that they can shoot and add the effects, so they can give Paul Walker's character Brian his proper send off. it reminds me of a situation like that where people are like, "Oh my God, Fury 7 was an emotional roller coaster. I was tearing at the end," and I'm like, "You mean the same movie where Vin Diesel stomped a parking lot and split it in half and made it crumble?" And the same movie where Dwayne Johnson says, "Daddy has to go to work," and rips apart a cast with his bare hands. Actually, it is Dwayne Johnson. I'm pretty sure he can actually do that. But the point is that you know tunnel vision is kind of created sometimes with scenarios like this, and I'm hoping that the movie doesn't take advantage of that tunnel vision and still delivers a great Black Panther story, a great Marvel movie, and I don't want to say the cherry on top, but the extra thing that the extra feat that the movie is able to accomplish is treating the passing of both T'Challa and Chadwick Boseman with grace and poignancy, and maturity, and is able to just become one of the best Marvel movies we had in a long time. And it still looks optimistically well from the trailer. Like the trailer, like I said, it's an amazing trailer. Give whoever edited that thing, give them a raise. But that's my only real concern right now, is the movie getting by on these emotional tethers, because it's a very sensitive thing, and I'm the dark motherfucker to be like, okay, yeah, but some of these people that are showing, bawling their eyes out in the thumbnail, there's like a 10% of me that wants to go, did you actually meet him though? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you also got family members. They're still alive. I'm just, like I said, that's just my evil part of me that can't help but get just a little bit triggered by that. But this is probably my last time that I'm probably going to touch the subject. And I think I felt like I went off just a little too long on this. Let's move on to the other trailer, which was She-Hulk. For the most part, the effects kind of look a little better, but not really with She-Hulk. The tone is still there, that it's meant to be a comedy. We did get our first look at her breaking the fourth wall, which is pretty interesting, which is also not at all shocking. Like, it was surprising in the trailer, but once I watched the show for it to come out, I would have been like, oh yeah, she breaks the fourth wall an awful lot of times in the that in the comics she does break the fourth wall an awful lot. I did not know that she was the precursor to it, or the predecessor to it prior to Deadpool. Deadpool was actually in second place for doing this sort of thing, so that's pretty interesting. But yeah, overall it's still the same, similar thing. Like I said, some shots look a little bit better as far as textures, but overall she's still looking a little rubber bandery. And it's funny because I still see the same comments of people saying, why does she look like this but Hulk looks great? And I'm like, because Hulk was made by ILM and they literally just had to share a file. Like, it's an oversimplification, but they literally just have to share a file over Dropbox or Google Drive because he was already made. That's all they have to do is literally copy and paste them. She-Hulk is an original character made by this new FX team. And so, yeah, she had to be built from scratch. In some shots, she looks good, and then others, she still looks a little bit questionable. And it's funny because this could also be used as a symbol for the quality of the show as well, as far as like comedy. Because there were some moments in the trailer that did make me chuckle a little bit, and there's others where I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to lie, that's a little bit on the cringy side. Like the opening with her being woken up by the blowhorn. She's like, yeah, it's just a normal amount of rage. I'm like, okay, I get it. And then, Hulk, Professor Hulk, for the sake of comedy, yes. Spandex is your best friend. I'm like, I'm not laughing over here. Are you expecting me to laugh? Because I'm not laughing. So for overall, the trailer was just kind of okay. But then they were like, "Oh, you thought the trailer was okay? Well, here, let me give you a little something here. Let me give you a little nugget, a little crumb to look forward to that August." I was gonna say August 17th, but I just heard breaking news that it got pushed a day. She-Hulk is gonna be debuting on Thursday, starting August 18th, not the 17th. But here's a little something to have you look forward to that date, and that is of the man with no fear front flipping into frame at the very end of the trailer. So there was some rumors and speculation that Matt Murdock could be involved in She-Hulk, and that would have made sense to me because they're both lawyers. Jennifer Walters is a lawyer. She's going to be representing a superhero division. We got a little bit more of Emil Blonsky, a little bit more of tie-ins to the Edward Norton movie, with her mentioning that Emil Blonsky / Abomination was trying to kill her cousin Bruce. So I'm like, okay, you're technically still acknowledging the movie, even though, we still can't have that badass Hulk again. And we're probably not going to have Mark Ruffalo actually talk to Emil Blonsky. It's probably a thing that Universal said they couldn't do. And we also get Benedict Wong coming back as Wong. So it's interesting that Wong is pretty much shaping up to, I heard somebody else say this, that he is being shapen up to be pretty much the next Coulson. You know how Coulson was in pretty much everything throughout Phase 1? He's pretty much our Coulson now, our mystical Coulson, and I'm digging it because I really like Wong a lot in that role. But we do get not Matt Murdock, but Daredevil front flipping here at the end of the trailer, sporting what looks to be a much more classic looking suit. It looks like he's wearing a predominantly yellow and red suit, kind of like how he did. So basically, like, the torso's going to be red, but then his sleeves and his mask are going to be yellow, with an awful lot of the freeze frame screenshots showing this a little bit in its blurring fashion. That could be cool. That could be cool. It would also make sense for the character at this point, because without going into spoilers, let's just say that the red suit kind of has a bit of a stigma. If they're staying in canon with the Netflix show, there's a bit of a taintness to the red suit, to the overall red suit from season 3. So he's probably trying to separate from that, and I feel like his effort to make the suit now gold and red or yellowish and red is probably his effort to do that. And I dig that as a solid motivation for his character going forward, especially since it looks like an awful lot of people's campaign to get Daredevil back to the forefront because of how much of a fan favorite he was with everybody is pretty much being pushed forward by Marvel themselves. Perfect segue to get into the overall announcements that Kevin Feige, the Feigmeister, okay, I'm not even going to say that, but of course, Kevin Feige had to come forward, blast it up on the screen, and show what the overall plan is going to be for Marvel's Phase 5 and even Phase 6 into 2025. So, just to make it clear again, we're gonna kind of breeze through this because there's a lot, and at the same time, it's one of those things where it could just be covered by very simple cliff notes. One of the things that I kind of took away from Kevin Feige coming forward and being like, and saying the things that he said, was something that I always felt should have been the case, and he's just now kind of confirming it, is that every Avengers movie from here on out is going to be the cap for each phase, for each like main phase, main thing. And so, for each like saga, actually that's what he meant, saga. And we're officially entering the multiverse saga. So we had the Infinity Saga, which was phases 1 through 3. Multiverse Saga is pretty much going to be phase 4 through 6. And phase 4 officially will end with Black Panther Wakanda Forever here in November. So we're pretty much on the sunset times of phase 4. And starting in 2023, we're going to be entering phase 5. And this is pretty much what it is. Like I said, this is kind of like a rough cliff notes. And I think something that we should also all kind of just keep at the forefront of our brains here as Marvel bitches is that, pandemic is still technically happening. Knock on wood, a second pandemic could be happening because of monkeypox. We'll see how that thing goes. I don't know, but America's kind of stupid, so we'll see where that kind of goes forward, and if any of these dates are very, very much subject to change, man. So let's go ahead and take a look here. And it's funny because they did a good job of kind of letting us know what's on Disney Plus and what's not. So at the very beginning of 2023, and I'm looking at the picture here that pretty much shows the entire map that Kevin Feige laid down here on the screen. February 17th, 2023, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, which did get a trailer or sizzle reel-ish kind of thing shown off at Comic-Con exclusively that was unfortunately not shown to the public. However, be careful because some people did leak it. Some people were recording somewhere in the front rows. You can kind of see it kind of just. I've seen some screenshots, but they were thankfully of just like Paul Rudd, and he's like talking to somebody. But I'm like, you know what? I have a gist of who he's talking to, but I don't want to. I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna wait for the HD version. It's just probably a couple. It comes out in February, for God's sakes. It comes out February 17th. We're already in August. We're 6 months away. I'm pretty certain that in the next, I almost want to say like 2 or 3 months ish, we'll get a trailer. As we get a little closer to Wakanda Forever, I'm pretty sure we'll get a trailer for Quantumania. So that's coming up then. Spring 2023 on Disney Plus is the Secret Invasion show with Nick Fury, played by Samuel L. Jackson, and the Skrulls are involved. May 5th, 2023, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, with also a trailer that was shown exclusively at Comic-Con, not released to the public. Got a first look at Adam Warlock, played by Will Poulter. And the cast got kind of emotional because they're kind of teasing that this is it. This is the ending for the Guardians. Some stakes are involved, and James Gunn got emotional. So, oh yeah, and this wasn't shown on the map because it's technically not part of Phase 5. But sometime here in the ending of Phase 4, kind of around the Christmas time, we do get the holiday special, the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special debuting on Disney Plus. In the summer of 2023, we got the Echo show on Disney Plus, which is going to be featuring Daredevil and Wilson Fisk, played by Vincent D'Onofrio. So they're going to be coming back. They're really pushing for it. And then also in the summer of 2023, with no set date, but it is currently filming right now, Loki Season 2, dropping on Disney+. Then over on the theatrical side, July, that looks like a 8 or 6, either 26th or 28th. July 20-something, 2023, The Marvels, with Miss Marvel, Captain Marvel, and Photon, a.k.a. Monica Rambeau. And then set with an official release date, and this was brand new. A lot of people didn't see this. November 3rd, 2023, Blade with Mahershala Ali, which of course a lot of people are speculating right now. Is it going to be rated R? Is it going to be PG-13? Well, we shall see. Fall of 2023, we have the Ironheart Disney Plus series, which is kind of foreshadowed a little bit in Wakanda Forever. The trailer, we do see Riri Williams kind of building something with the heart shape being cut out, so that's pretty interesting. Arguably, probably the least hyped announcement shown on the map that probably got like the least claps because everyone's like, really? We need a show of this? Agatha, Coven of Chaos, coming to Disney Plus in either the winter of 2023, or it says winter 2023/24. So it's like it could either drop in December or January. They don't have really a set time on that one, and I think the fact that it's because of the reception that people are like, really, an Agatha show? It's probably their way of saying, yeah, that's the general window that we want to release it, but we're not full on. We don't fully know. But then in the spring of 2024, we have the culmination of how much they're bringing back Daredevil, bringing back Wilson Fisk, with the I guess you could say revamp of the Daredevil show from Netflix, or season 4 of the Daredevil show on Disney Plus. Daredevil Born Again, consisting of 18 episodes, and it looks like they have it all set in stone, and that's going to be pretty hype. Personally, it's funny because I like the logo. I mean, I'm sorry. No, the opposite. I love the title because it kind of ties into Matt's Catholicism. Sorry. Wow, that was stupid. Catholicism. But I don't like the actual design of the logo. It looks a little generic to me. I kind of wish that they would bring back the very flashy red slanted Daredevil from the old school comics. Like, how it kind of looks like it's arched. They did that for the Netflix show and it looked awesome, but I guess because they're trying to sever ties with Netflix, they can't use that old school logo, so they're going to have to come up with something new. And that's probably what they did. Then on May 3rd, 2024, Captain America New World Order, aka Captain America 4 with Sam Wilson. Kind of surprising that we have to wait that far out to get a new Captain America movie, but it is what it is. And then July Jesus Christ, I hate how blurry this thing is, but I think it says July 25th, 2024 is the Thunderbolts movie, which I'm very interested in because obviously the Thunderbolts are being set up right now with an awful lot of the recent projects. Black Widow, we had Yelena Villanova. She-Hulk is setting to set up Abomination. It looked for a while we were going to get Red Hulk in the way of Thunderbolt Ross, but unfortunately, I don't know how they're going to do that now with the unfortunate passing of William Hurt, so I don't know if that's a character they're going to have to swap out. Of course, Falcon and the Winter Soldier had Baron Zemo come back, so he's part of the Thunderbolts. And then also in Falcon and the Winter Soldier was U.S. Agent. So you have all these members of the Thunderbolts kind of being brought together by a common denominator here, and that's the Countess. I can't remember her exact name, but her nickname is the Countess, and she's played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and she's been showing up in an awful lot of these projects. And so she's pretty much going to be the anti-Nick Fury, the Nick Fury to the Thunderbolts. And they're, some people have called them, anti-Avengers, evil Avengers. I pretty much call them the Marvel equivalent of the Suicide Squad. And I'm looking forward to that because I've always liked the concept of the Suicide Squad from DC. I loved Gunn's version from James Gunn's version from last year with Idris Elba and all of them. It was arguably one of my favorite, if not my favorite movie of last year. I'm sorry, No Way Home, but it is what it. I've seen the Suicide Squad I think like 3 times, and No Way Home I've only seen it twice. So there you go. Because I just love how crazy it is. I love how unique and different it wants to go for. And so if they could do something similar like that on the Marvel spectrum with these, ragtag team of anti-heroes or formal villains, I can see that. I can see Zemo and U.S. Agent and Abomination in there being the anti-Avengers and giving us something fresh and new that takes the concept of Avengers that we've already seen in 4 fucking movies and turn it on its head. So I gotta be honest, out of all of these, Thunderbolts, even though it may not be my most hyped, it's probably my most, it's probably the one I'm looking forward to the most as far as uniqueness, as far as potential of what they can do in the future. And then lastly, Phase 6. Yes, Phase 6, bleeding on over into 2025. It's crazy that they went ahead. Now, thankfully, Phase 6 only consists of 3 projects right now, but one of them is, of course, the Fantastic Four movie, which is set to be on in 2024. I'm trying to look at the date here, but the picture won't punch in. I don't know why. Here we go. November 8th. 2024 is a Fantastic Four movie, and of course right now it looks like a lot of people are discussing and there's leaks and speculation and rumors of who's going to be playing the Fantastic Four, if they're going to be able to bring, spoilers in case you haven't already heard, but they're trying to figure out if they're going to bring back John Krasinski after his Multiverse of Madness cameo. We'll see, because now there's rumors going around that the guy from You might play Mr. Fantastic, a different iteration, a different universe version. We'll see. And then there's nothing officially slated. There's actually quite an awful lot of gaps for fall of 2024, winter 2024, spring 2025. Another slot in there, and people are speculating, are these the X-Men movies, the standalone X-Men mutant movies? Deadpool 3 might be somewhere in there. Who knows? But then finally, on May 2nd, 2025, we have Avengers, the Kang Dynasty. And then a few months later, half a year later, November 7th, 2025, Avengers, Secret Wars. And just the mere fact that we have both Fantastic Four and Secret Wars in Phase 6 has a lot of people believing that we are going to get Doom. Dr. Doom finally coming to the MCU the way he's supposed to, because they already fucked him up twice. Can they really afford to? Can the MCU really afford to do this a third time? We shall see. And a lot of people are saying that we might get our first taste, our first tease of Doom. We're probably not going to see him. In fact, I almost hope we don't see him. But I'm hoping that they mention Latveria or some force, some kind of presence, some kind of interested party that's involved in the conflict between the Atlanteans and the Wakandan people in Wakanda Forever, because a lot of people are leading to believe that that's who's kind of instigating shit in Wakanda Forever, and that's Doom over there in Latveria. That's the whole reason for why there's a disturbance with Namor and why Namor is probably going to be our villain here. a lot of people are piecing these things together, and it sounds kind of legit that that's what's exactly happening, and that's gonna lead us to Secret Wars. But somewhere in there, there's got to be these standalone movies. I don't know if we'll get a standalone Doom movie, but yeah, man, it just then begs the question: how are Doom and Kang gonna be kind of butting heads with each other as villains? Are we really gonna get two Thanos-sized villains as far as their intimidation and their presence and their level of threat? Because Kang is already kind of starting to be set up here with Loki season 1 and all these, Quantum Mania and such. Secret Wars, for those of you who don't know, Secret Wars is pretty much a multi-dimensional, multiversal free-for-all that is pretty much like a tournament style thing being hosted by Doctor Doom. So the fact that Secret Wars is even mentioned here by title is like, yeah, Doom's got to be involved. But with Kang being in there as well, like, who's going to be holding the gauntlet here? So, like I said, there's an awful lot of discussion, a lot of... that's why I'm saying that even though a little bit of the fatigue that was set forth by Phase 4, which somebody on Twitter mentioned it probably in the best way possible, which was that Phase 4 feels like when you beat the final boss in an RPG and you go back and try to do the side quests, but you already beat the final boss, so you're kind of like, what's the point? That's kind of Phase 4, and I'm like, damn, that really is how Phase 4 felt. We beat Thanos. Like, Phase 4 is just kind of like, yeah, we're doing these things. And some people attribute that to COVID and how that kind of pushed things along. Me and my buddy Greg, we were talking about how it would have felt like if Multiverse of Madness happened before No Way Home, and then we went online and found out that that's actually how it was supposed to happen. No Way Home was supposed to come out first and then Multiverse of Madness, but there was a reshift as far as the shooting schedule because of COVID. So yeah, I feel like that was one of the issues there. And now I'm thinking to myself, with monkeypox, is history doomed to repeat with Phase 5 and 6? We'll see, but hopefully, even if we do get a second pandemic, I mean, at least there's got to be some kind of protocols now in line, now knowing that we know kind of how to behave as far as the film industry, as far as the creation industry is concerned, going into the office, going on set and such, of how to operate during a pandemic. You know what I'm saying? Even if the virus is a different case, is a different strain or whatever, at least we know how to kind of perform that way, and hopefully maybe this is a way to get things prepared in a good way, that going into Phase 5 and Phase 6, we don't see too much of a reshuffle and too much of a ripple effect that can affect the quality of these movies, because Phase 4 was definitely taking a hit, and hopefully Feige and everybody that's part of the board over there at Marvel Studios knows how to go, take things full on, because I definitely want to feel the hype and the energy that we all felt when we were going through Phase 2. We were seeing the Infinity Stones, and then we were seeing Thanos plotting, and then we finally got to the 1-2 punch event that was Infinity War and Endgame. And for a little while there, we were feeling like we weren't gonna get Endgame levels of hype again. I would really love to get that hype come back, and hopefully the preparation is going to be key for that. So now you're probably wondering, what about DC? What about Warner Brothers? What could they possibly have shown at San Diego Comic-Con? Well, when you find out, you tell me. Honestly, it just boils down to 3 primary things. We got a new trailer for Black Adam. It was a very short trailer. It's like a minute and something. It did showcase a little bit more cool stuff as far as what the powers that be with not only Black Adam himself, played by Dwayne Johnson, but also with the Justice Society, or I can't remember what the name is called, but it's pretty much like I don't want to say anti-Justice League, because technically that would be Justice League Dark. But Dr. Fate, Atom Smasher, Hawkman, you name them. And so you saw them do a little bit more cool stuff in that trailer, and I thought to myself, okay, it is, even though it's meant to be a shorter trailer, it's also a little less bloated up than that initial trailer for Black Adam was. And because of that, it had better momentum, it had better action, and it actually made me look at the movie and be like, all right, let me check it out. I was already kind of interested in the movie for one little personal factor. That personal factor is actually the director. I think his name is Jame Colette Serra. And the reason why I'm interested in him is because this director, who has worked with Liam Neeson a couple of times for action movies like Unknown, and a couple of other flicks, The Commuter, and but beyond that, he graduated from the same film school that I went to, Columbia College Hollywood. So I think that's kind of interesting to see what skills he picked up from that and see how it transcends into film. Not knowing Now knowing that he's worked with Liam Neeson, he's made action movies, and now he's making a DCE. Well, I don't even know if you could call it a DCEU because God only knows what the fuck they're doing over there. But they showed a little bit more of Black Adam. The Rock himself came on stage wearing the suit. He activated people's lanyards. He donated IMAX tickets. He's doing the works. And you could tell that he's loving it. He's loving the promotion he's doing for Black Adam. He loves the character. There's something kind of authentic. People might be getting a little tired of Dwayne Johnson right now, but I can at least give him respect and credit for the hustle that he's putting forth for Black Adam, whether it be for the actual Black Adam movie or other related things that may or may not be in theaters right now. I don't want to spoil, but you do the math. So we got that, and then we got a new trailer for Shazam: Wrath of the Gods. We finally got our first trailer for that one. I watched it. Looks fun. It looks fine. I gotta be honest, there's nothing about it that gets me hyped, but I'm still interested. I like the movie quite an awful lot. With this one, I'm just a little concerned that maybe it's been a little too long, that maybe they should have hit the ground running a little quicker. So the fact that we're waiting about, what was it, like 4 years? I think Shazam came out, what, 2019 or 20? No, I think it came out 2019. So it's been a few years. I feel like it should have come out a little bit earlier, but at the same time, we technically still have COVID protocols and things like that. Like I said, the trailer, there's something about it that just doesn't, hype me up, but I'm still curious. I'm still down to see the movie. You get what I'm saying? So, you still got some cool stuff going on right there. What is not cool is that they're still confirming, and I think even Dwayne Johnson touched a little bit on this, that Shazam and Black Adam are still not crossing over. There's no plans right now for them to cross over to either be, going toe-to-toe against each other, Shazam versus Black Adam or something like that, or if they're going to be cameoing or showing up in their respective movies, unless they're lying, and maybe once we see the movies, there'll be something there. But right now, they're saying, oh yeah, there's no plans to connect them, and I'm like, but why? They oh my God, they literally have the same lightning bolt on their fucking chest. And of course, that's not accounting the actual correlation they have in the comics. Why would you not want to do this? Like, it just confuses me, but it doesn't stop there. At the Black Adam panel, Dwayne Johnson got booed. And he got booed because one of the questions he received was from someone who asked him if Black Adam is ever going to go toe-to-toe with the Man of Steel himself, Superman. Dwayne Johnson responded, "It depends on who's playing Superman," and people booed him because obviously that's kind of a tongue-in-cheeky kind of response to say there's not a whole lot going on right there as far as what Warner Brothers wants to push ahead for Superman. And that comes right before that DC panel ending and people going, where the fuck is Superman? There was no mention. Henry Cavill didn't show up despite rumors. There was nothing. There were no crickets. This is fucking Superman. We still got more Batman related stuff coming out of Comic-Con in one shape or another, whether it be video games with Gotham Knights or the recent news that Ben Affleck's going to be coming back for Aquaman, which makes no fucking sense to me, because they're trying to, my theory is that they're trying to get attention on Aquaman because of all the Amber Heard stuff. I gotta be honest, that's my theory, is that Aquaman is getting such a bad rap with the Amber Heard trial that they're like, well, how do we get good graces to come back for Aquaman? Oh, let's throw in, Ben Affleck's Batman. What is going on over there? And it gets fucking worse. Again, the fact, I'm not even that big of a Superman fan, but like I stated on Twitter, my heart hurts for those that were yearning for Henry Cavill to show up, maybe wearing a Superman shirt and be like, hey, I'm back. I'm going to be doing a trilogy. We're looking for directors. We're looking for a good script, or we got a good script. I don't know, like something like that. It it pains me because I remember back when I was a kid, I generally was a diehard Superman fan. Kind of fell out after a little while, and then I then gravitated more towards Batman and Spider-Man. But I really was a Superman kid when I was like 5 or 6. So there's still some kind of, you know, connection there. There's still something there that I empathize with. So seeing people hurt for Superman after this recent Comic-Con outing, my heart goes out to you guys. It really, really does, for all you Superman fans out there. And now, and I don't know if they were waiting for Comic-Con to be over to make this decision, but of course we get the bombastic news that Warner Brothers / Discovery, because of that fucking merger or whatever it is that they dealt with, and DC respectively, have canceled the Batgirl movie. Now, it's one thing, pregnant pause there, it's one thing to cancel a movie that was very early in development and they might have been a script and maybe things fell through, funding, etc., you name it. But it is fucking crazy when a movie gets canceled after, I don't know, like 2/3 or 3/4 of it had been shot and some effects were already starting to be finalized somewhat. Got the article here from the New York Post. Irredeemable Batgirl movie gets shelved by Warner Brothers despite $70 million price tag. So I'm quoting a little bit of the article. I'm going to skip the holy millions down the drain Batman quote or pun here because it's stupid. But it says right here, the DC Comics film Batgirl will be completely shelved by Warner Brothers, a top Hollywood source told the Post. Obviously, it's been confirmed now. That means it won't hit theaters or the streaming service HBO Max. Fans will not see it. The reportedly $7 million movie, the source said the budget was actually more than $100 million, which was doing test screenings for audiences in anticipation of a late 2022 debut. It was done. It was doing test screenings. Holy shit. Would rank amongst the most expensive cinematic cast-offs ever. Those tests were said to be so poorly received by moviegoers that the studio decided to cut its losses and run for the sake of the brand's future. It's a DC disaster. They think an unspeakable Batgirl is going to be irredeemable, the source said. The Post has reached out to Warner Brothers for comment, and there was a separate article from Warner Brothers saying, what they were trying to do, what the reason for why they did that and why they wanted to cut the losses. And I honestly don't even want to look that article up. I don't want to give this over to Warner Brothers because what stopped you before from making fucking Suicide Squad? The first one, not the James Gunn one, but the first one. What stopped you from doing Batman versus Superman? It's the money. It's not the quality, because they're talking about the irredeemable quality and the poor test screenings. No, it's the money. And here's the thing, is that I honestly don't want to talk about this Batgirl scenario too much, because the more I pondered it, the more I let time kind of go by a little bit to see more quotes from the people that are involved making the film, which are obviously the ones that are most impacted and the ones I feel the most sorry for, mainly Leslie Grace, who was playing Batgirl. All those people, my heart goes out to them. But the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, I gotta be honest, I'm feeling a little bit of the essay itch, the video essay itch, very similar to Spider-Man Lotus, like I did with that project. So I don't want to, word vomit too much on the mic here as far as how I feel about this whole Batgirl scenario, because I'm feeling like maybe, just maybe, this is material ripe for a video essay, and plus it's Batman related, so it should probably be going on there. But just as a quick kind of spiel as to how I feel about the scenario, it's one thing, like I said, to maybe go into pre-production, build the sets or whatever, and then cancel the movie. But for it to actually have a test screener out there, it's like, do reshoots. $100 million for a company like Warner Brothers, you could have thrown in an extra 15, 20. But the Flash movie's still out there. Again, in the past couple of years, you've had Batman vs Superman. You had the shit with Justice League. You gave Zack Snyder the extra $30 million to put together his 4-hour cut. I gotta be honest, I'm one of the few times I might go just a tinge SJW and say, is it because it's Batgirl and not Batman? It's a question. Obviously we can't confirm here, and Warner Brothers can give off their statements all they want. And here's the thing: for the sake of this off-the-cuff, on mic, on podcast explanation, I didn't bother to look up that article, that statement that Warner Brothers put out there. I'll definitely be pulling it up and sourcing it when I get to the video essay. But for now, this, like I said, I just feel like it's unfair. Regardless if the movie was going to be shit, it was done. You have a streaming service, sure, maybe not for the movie theater, but you have a fucking streaming service that would have been perfect, because there would have been less of a gamble for audiences to be like, oh, let me go out there, especially with the potential second pandemic out here with the monkeypox shit. I don't want to go to the theater for that. I wish it was on a streaming service. Boom, HBO Max. Perfect. Fucking perfect. Why not? Why not? For the first whole year of HBO Max's inception, you had movies come out both in theaters and on HBO Max. Why not do both? Or why not just do HBO Max by itself? Why didn't you do that? I'm gonna let a few more days go so that hopefully more information comes through from either some anonymous sources, maybe some visual effects artists that were doing the post-production stuff, some kind of casting director or the director themselves. I know that the director also has spoken out. Leslie Grace, like I said, put out a statement herself. I'm going to be gathering my sources here because, like I said, I'm feeling the itch to do some kind of video essay and strike while the iron is hot. But for right now, Batgirl getting canceled and everything that's going on with HBO Max, because it's not the only thing. Apparently some original movies have been quietly taken off the service. A sequel to the animated Scooby-Doo movie was also recently canceled, and that was nearing completion. Something weird is going on over there, to the point where even people who are involved with Warner Brothers, but maybe they're not doing like a movie. Like, for example, the people who work for Player One Games that are working on multiverses had to put out a statement saying, we're not involved with the merger. It's damning. It's really fucking damning. And it's like, what are you guys doing over there? Eventually, you're gonna have to be transparent, because otherwise, oh man, this is putting my HBO Max subscription into question. And making me look at Paramount Plus like, hey, what do you guys got? What do you guys got? And then some other people are going on Twitter saying, hey, as a creator, as a writer, producer, director, now knowing that you have something cooking in the pot over in either Netflix, who's recently been canceling stuff, and HBO Max, who is now doing all this bullshit, I would feel insecure. I would most definitely feel insecure. And people on Twitter that are working for these companies as a writer, as a producer, behind closed doors, they're going to Twitter saying, yeah, I feel scared. I feel nervous right now, because who knows if this thing that I've been working on for years, all of a sudden, even if it got filmed, even if it got the green light, just gets shelved, just gets pushed aside and be like, yeah, nobody's going to see that. Money aside, we're taking the money out of it. No one's going to see your work. Can you imagine that feeling? As a creator, I can, and my God, it's a terrible experience. And like I said, one that I think deserves the video essay treatment, because I'm feeling like a spotlight needs to be put on this. So I don't want to divulge too much into that, so I'm gonna cut it off short there. And folks, that's actually gonna be it for the premiere episode of the DarkspiderCast Season 5. Truth be told, I had a couple more stories here that are video game related, such as the GTA 6 leaks and reports coming from Bloomberg and the controversy surrounding that, as well as something to do with Beyond Good and Evil 2. But honestly, the episode, from what I can tell, is actually quite long enough now that I'm gonna go ahead and punt those stories over for the second episode for next week, because I feel like we're just talking about too much stuff now at this point, and my voice is getting a little sore. But that about does it, guys. Thank you guys for listening. I appreciate you. If you guys want to stay in touch, you guys know where to find me on social media, Twitter and Instagram at DarkspiderDavid. The website could also be found in the description, or the main YouTube channel where that potential Batgirl video essay may be going up on. So you guys can find that, or simply just search me on YouTube at DarkspiderDavid, all one word, and you guys will find me instantly. Otherwise, guys, thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. Hopefully I'll talk to you guys next week, and in the meantime, stay humble.